Welcome, everyone, to the Geneos 7 Tech Update webinar. Thanks for joining. Appreciate your time, and I'm really looking forward to explaining some new stuff that we're delivering today. Now, we do these Geneos 7, we can do these updates, a big major release update once a year, which normally means we're kind of decommissioning some old stuff that's no longer in support. But this one's different. So all of these webinars are important, but this one's really important. And so I'm going to be showing you some stuff that we're delivering. It's one of the biggest releases we've done, a huge amount of stuff here. It really is a game changer, and we hope you agree. So I'll be explaining what those things are. And then also I'm joined by, and so I'll be explaining these big 5 things that we're delivering. There's other stuff within the release. So there's some new plugins, there's some issues that have been fixed and so on. But I'm going to be concentrating on showing you the 5 big things in this new release. I'm joined by Dave Randall, Global Head of Pre-Sales, who will be demonstrating those 5 things. And then I'm going to be answering a couple of questions after that demo. So let's start. What are these big 5 things? Well, before we go into that, let's talk about the challenges that you tell us about in your Geneos world. Number 1, I'm getting so many alerts, I don't trust Geneos anymore. I've been there with you. Lots of times where the gateways are always red, your net probes are red, managed entities red, and you kind of, it gets to a stage where I don't really trust Geneos anymore. I don't really know what's really red and as opposed to just noise. The second thing that we hear you say is, whilst Geneos is brilliant for that real-time data, you don't really know what normal is. It's kind of like, so if you don't really know what normal is, it's kind of hard to say whether something is good or bad. The next one is I can't see what's going to happen. Again, Geneos is brilliant for real-time data, but it's kind of hard to see ahead of time to see what's going to happen. This is a favorite of mine that I hear you, that I know that everyone out there does. I can't tell if my team are just ignoring alerts by snoozing them. So on a Monday morning or a Wednesday morning, we know all of this stuff happens. This managed entity blows up. We're just going to snooze it, and snooze it. There's a right time and a wrong time for snoozing, but it can become a habit. And then relating to this snoozing and not knowing whether you trust Geneos anymore, it's really hard to see what's going on with those alerts. Are your volumes increasing, decreasing? Are there noisy applications or dodgy rules? You can kind of get this information out of the database, but it's quite hard to do it. And you end up having to stitch stuff together, which means you don't do it. So you don't really know what's going on with your alerts. Next one. Again, constantly hear this. Like you're sitting there at your console, and something important has happened, and you know that there's someone else you need to show this to, but they won't install the console. So sharing your information is really difficult. And last but not least, probably my favorite, is constantly hear this. I love what the console does, but it's so 1990s. All of these things we constantly hear, and they are all addressed in Geneos 7. By these 5 new features. We've got an entity viewer, which is like a monitoring app that replaces a lot of the monitoring views in the active console, dynamic thresholds, forecasting, historical calculations, and an alerting app. So we're really proud of these 5 features. It addresses all of those problems. And I'm now pleased to hand over to Dave Randall, who is going to show you some of these features.
So, Chris has told you about these 5 features. I can't stress enough and kind of reiterate Chris's point that these are some major changes in the product. This is a true evolution in the kind of journey of Geneos. And it's, in the time we've been here, there's not been many as such a huge kind of impact to the environment. So what we're going to do now is going to switch over to show you what the environment looks like. So the first thing you'll realize, and the first thing that kind of stands out, and it goes to one of Chris's points, this is now web-based. Now, whilst that may not be a new thing in the industry. For Geneos and the desktop app, this is a major improvement. This is major to the fact that now you no longer have to package up the Active Console, deploy the Active Console. Now you can restrict that just to your power users for the configuration. Your level 1, your level 2 guys, all of this, and we'll show you how the impact is so great, is now on the web. So again, we have to ensure that all of the functionality around role-based access control, SSO logins, authenticated access, all of that now is encompassed in the new release of Geneos 7. There's a couple of key features we've had added. And I'm going to kind of give you an overview of the kind of key things which you don't have today. So in the first instance, the context. At the very top, I can now add a context, which is almost like adding a new workspace for the state tree of exactly what I want to see. I can now break this down by business unit, by department, by application, by any means I want to. So now I can see those, and just by clicking the different elements, I can see just that part. Now, what we'll see is that flows through to other applications we've got within the Geneos 7, which means you can really start taking advantage of that structured, focused, and kind of really deep dive view. We've tried to ensure that the migration from your Active Console to the new web console is as seamless as possible. And with minimal change, you get maximum output. So if you look on, you'll first notice on the left-hand side, the state tree, a kind of standard thing with the Active Console, and something which is key to kind of give you an understanding of what area of your environment has got issues. I've still got that flow, and all that investment I put into over the years with Geneos is automatically pushed into the web console. So I still retain that same look and feel. Again, the logical and physical views, how I can see this by gateway, by probe, all of that still is retained. In addition now, what I can do is I can just see for my whole estate, I can see the breakdown. I'm looking by gateway, by region, by category, your standard attributes, the best practice attributes of how you set this up. I can drag and drop across to change the order in which I see things, so I can really start to kind of hone in on where I want. If I just want to look at one gateway, because I've got such a large estate, by clicking on here, I'm now just focusing temporarily, in my view only, what gateways I'm looking at. So I can see that. I can just click on show triggered only. So only show me areas where I've got problems. And you can start to see that categorization is still retained while I'm doing this. If I click on a manage entity, if I click it through, you'll see that all of the views that you've seen in Geneos today still retained. I've got my hardware plugins, I've got my disk plugins. And if I look at my CPU, for example, I've still got the same data views exactly how I would in the Active Console. But now it's more web-based. My severities come through, or my headlines are still there. So everything is still retained. By clicking through and seeing my severities, I've now got the added addition of, by clicking through, I can now see, and again, I've got a timeline potted history of any timeline I want. I can see all of today's CPU for that one cell. Now, the emphasis here is any single metric on my system that I'm collecting data from, I can see this view from. For efficiencies, I've got a conflated history for that day, but by drilling in, I can start to see that down to the exact sampling time and that full fidelity data that you had before. So I'm losing no data at all, or the granularity. For all the severity changes today, I can see what happened at what time. I can click through and see what rule caused it. Now, we're going to come back to that, because now, with all of that data coming through, I now have the added bonus of seeing what rules are being used, where that alerting is going to cause me issues, and how I can deep dive. but we'll save that. We'll save it. We'll save that for later. If I look through, not only do I have metrics, and again, this is such an added bonus here, I can see, for example, FKM. I can see all of my log files, which I'm monitoring, the same FKM view. And again, second since last update, I can actually start plotting that data. It's a metric. So that all still applies. By going to the log tab, what I've also got now is not only what the logs I'm looking at, but also the match keys I'm looking at. I can look through here, and by any metric, any log I'm monitoring, if I click on here, I now see all of my log events which I matched for today. I can search through these. So if I push down here, I can look and see every instance, for example, of my certificate related issues. So all of that is retained. And that is where we kind of start to see that data. And as we go through, I can drill down and see that information. So I'm losing no investment of time I've historically done. Now I've seen all of my data here, and I want to take it back to here. I can see my standard attributes, and I can see all of my noise. But now I've got that noise, how do I start to understand how I can look at my noise? And to one of Chris's key points earlier, I've got too much noise. So we've already got the noise here. So basically, we've taken all your information you've got before, we've pushed it over, we'll understand where that noise is. So now I want to drill down further, and we introduce here the alerting app. Now the alerting app in here is now going to show me all of my alerts. And again, this is for today. If I want to do different periods, I just select those other periods. The top section is giving you kind of a simple analysis of your environment, what the noise score is. So to Chris's point, is my volumes of alerts getting higher, or are they getting lower? And I can see a very simple area here of what's happening. Now what I want to do is just comparing me out of the box, is comparing how my noise is affected from today to yesterday. So now I can get an idea. Now I can take that back a month now and to see how is my alert volumes from this month comparing to last month. Again, how do I do that? How do I drill down even further? So now the same attributes I set up for my context, which is the context here, which is everything, I can see by gateway, by region, by category, 3 of my key attributes, where that noise is coming from, what region it's coming from, and also which category. So it's very evident here that my pre-sale server 1 is the noisiest, so I can click through here. That gives me a subsection here. Most of my noise is in EMEA, and obviously it's infrastructure. What I can also see is how many warnings and criticals, and what cell is causing me that most noise. So it's probably of no surprise to everyone watching this that my percent utilization is a flapping metric, and my rule on it is going to be hit quite a few times. I can look on here, and this kind of supports that information. But now I've got a lot of derived data that shows me the majority of those messages only last between 15 and 30 seconds, your general sample time. So the first thing I would do, obviously, in this situation is to probably change that rule to put a delay on there to say, only let me know if it goes above that for a period of time. And I think those experienced Geneos users will kind of see that by doing that, you could probably reduce this noise of my 9,000 mesh signals today. I could probably reduce that by half just by adding that simple thing. But I can very quickly see where that noise is happening. So if I just want to see which ones are creating incidents, I can click on my critical. I can see that 1,500 of those were only kind of short-lived. So again, if you've got that integration between your ServiceNow or your other incident management tools, I could probably reduce that significantly just by adding that area. And I can see the rule that happened on. And if you look here, if I want to go down to specific CPU instances or percent utilization, I can see where that is. Okay. But this is where all we're doing here really is understanding what my world is today. But in an ideal world, what we'd want to do is not only see how my environment is like that today. What I really want to do is prevent that noise in the first place. So this is kind of showing me how I address my noise today. But what I really want to do, and it'd be a great idea for most people, is if I never had that noise in the first place. So this goes back to one of the other key elements which Chris talked about. And one of those is to do with dynamic thresholds. Now, what is dynamic thresholds? You probably know this as anomaly detection or behavioral monitoring. So now I want to be intelligent about what I'm doing. How do I change my thresholds rather than being static? If above this, then go red. If above this, go yellow, go warning. How do I change that? So now what I want to do in an ideal world is I want to make the thresholds change based on the time of day and the historical behavior. And that is where, that is the kind of key thing we're trying to aim here. So what did Geneos 7 introduce? We introduced dynamic thresholds. Now I only want to know when I've got anomalous conditions. So if we go back to what we said before, I'm going to show you the output first, and then we're going to show you how we've done that. So we talked about the context. So I've set up a context here. I've got the same data view. Again, I've got my filter on. I've got to be careful of that. I've got the same data view. I've got the same output. But just for the sake of kind of showing you how this works, I've now put on here a dynamic threshold on two identical views, one with dynamic thresholds and one with static thresholds. I've given them an attribute so I can kind of see that key differentiation. And if I start to look down here for today, I can see that I've got a trading application that's showing me my trade volume. I've put a static threshold on there. And obviously this is extreme because these kind of test conditions, but you kind of get the principle now of how we can resolve this. So I had 1,800 signal changes or severity changes, and that's going from critical to warning to okay. So all of that, I've had 1,800. For dynamic, I've had 11. So you can start to see the impact. But if I take it down, the key ones I want to look at are my criticals. And you can see here, I've had nearly 180 critical messages today from this one data view. Now, for dynamic, I've got 4. So I can start to see there's going to be a significant impact just by having a dynamic threshold. And again, even for the dynamic, if I look through the dynamic here, I can see that my values here, and I can see that where it went critical at different times of day. I can see how it's worked from today to yesterday, and you can see there's some kind of overlap. So I can even improve upon that even further. But for my initial stance, I just want to see how that dynamic threshold has changed. Now you can see the power of where that could be used, but how is it actually done? So for that, we're going to go back to the entity viewer, and this is going to be prevention. So if I go back to that view we're talking about, I know it's my trading environment. So I'm going to go to my trading dynamic here. And what I've done is now I've used my historical data, and I've gone back 4 weeks, and it's the same rule block. You don't have to learn much more. It's just an additional piece of functionality in the rules. And for every metric on the system, I now have the ability to determine and I've got my 5th percentile, my 95th percentile, my standard deviation, my variance, my min, my max. I've got a lot more computational historical calculations on every metric. If you look here, EMEA markets open, the actual value is 635. The lowest I've been is 114. The highest I've been, taking out the extremes so they don't skew that data, is 941. And my standard deviation is 300. So you can see I've worked out the different calculations based on this time of day. And as this updates, you'll see that constantly change. Now, what does that mean? That means now I've got a kind of a window of tolerance of acceptable tolerance, taking out my extremes, my kind of very extremely busy days, my extremely quiet days. I've now got a window of where my live data can acceptably track between. Now, again, with all things Geneos, with the rules, I don't have to stick to that. I can say, let me know if I'm a few percent of an actual value above my 95th or below. So I can use all kind of calculations, and you can really get very granular on how this works. Graphically, I can now graph that kind of window ahead of time, and I can see how my live data is tracking within that window and how far it's getting. So that's a really, a huge step forward for Geneos. I can't tell you just how much this is going to make your life so much easier. And now, rather than dealing with that noise that Chris talked about right in the opening, I'm now going to start looking at, one, how I can address that with the alerting app. But secondly, now I can prevent that in the first place. So now my noise, that kind of common aspect of, oh, don't worry about that, it's always red on a Monday or a Tuesday, that goes away. And it limits the kind of, it maximizes the kind of accelerated progress you can make on getting that done. So we've worked out how we can do that. Now what we want to do, because we've now got the current data being addressed, we've got the historical data helping us understand what good looks like, so what normal is. So now I can understand now, tell me when I'm outside of normal behavior with my dynamic thresholds. But now I've got the historical data, what is the next logical step? The next logical step is to understand what my problems are going to be in the future. I've got this historical data. How do I start trending that data forward? So this is where one of the other big 5 things is the forecaster. We can now forecast and determine where things are going to go wrong based on the historical trend and the actual growth or reduction of data. So this is a positive and a negative way of how you can trend things are going up or down. So again, what I'll do is what we did before. I'll show you the outcome first. So we've introduced a new plugin called the Forecaster plugin. And if I show you here what the Forecaster plugin is doing, it's showing me now that based on my history, now we've got some database tables here. Those database tables are fluctuating throughout the day. So we've got this forecast to say, let me know when I'm going to hit a certain boundary. Now this is really opening up the avenues of where we can go. And then we've got some more exciting things coming in the future that's going to really accelerate and drive what we can do with this data, the historical data, to determine the future. Now you can look here, I've got 3 tables here. These are the tables. I've got my error tables, my identifier tables. Now I'm looking at when am I going to hit my 90% threshold in my database table. And you can look here, and I've put a rule in here that says, let me know when it's less than a day away. But I could essentially go in the last 4 weeks, understand that, and project forward 4 weeks, and let me know when I'm going to hit any kind of threshold in 4 weeks' time, pushing forward. That can be as simple as you're going to hit it tomorrow, or it can be you're going to hit it in 4 weeks. I mean, just imagine now being given that real proactive monitoring that enables you to actually plan ahead of time before you get an issue. And again, you can start to see how excited, people like myself and Chris are for having this new functionality. This is telling me that this is going to hit a problem at 10:20 tonight. So now I've got that, this is kind of an immediate problem, and you're going to have those out of the blocks because things change. But again, if we look here, I can see that this is for today, what the forecast has kind of generated. Now from here, you can see that what basically happened was my table's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. There's been a purge. So now the time or that database is filling up, and you can start to see I've got less and less time before that table hits 90%. So what that means is the forecaster is not just a one-stop shop. It's continually looking and reevaluating when it believes that kind of threshold to be hit. And that could be at any time. And you want that constant check-in because things will grow a lot more or reduce more over time. And you want to be able to forecast it to give you an accurate idea of when you're going to go. And that's what it does. So how do we do this? So this is the output. I've got all of my monitoring there in Geneos, so I can see when that's going to happen. I can notify people when things are going to happen ahead of time. And now I can, by simply adding it, I can very simply see, by putting that simple metric in there, using the context I set up before, I can start to see all of this data, what's going on. And this is where one fundamental thing, and it shows me here what's happening and how that data is going to be breached and where it's going to breach. Okay. The one key thing, which I thought I'd leave to the end, just to kind of make sure you understand the full kind of gravity of what we're doing, that we left out just to the end, just to kind of leave you with this. One thing we kind of are really proud of, incredibly proud of, is the idea now. So for any cell, we've also brought in the commands. And this is, to us, apart from all the other game-changing aspects, this is one key aspect we're really, really proud of. So if I go back to my trading environment, I look at my latency, I can go onto here. Now, you might have noticed these 3 dots. Now, all of my commands, which I have in Geneos today, are also promoted through to the web console. So based on authentication again, I've got fully authenticated commands, and I can see all of the information I want to see. These also include custom commands. So my custom commands, which I have, are now in here. And again, that is a huge thing for my level 1, level 2 supports, my application support teams. They can still run and make use of all of the commands they had and they're set up historically. So all of these are here. How do they look? You'll be surprised to see that when I look through here, the commands are just the same, and I can see my views, all of my data here, my variables, all of the functionality of commands are in here. And this really is, something very special. So, just to leave you with that, hopefully you've got a better idea of where that is. We've got some more exciting things to come. But for the moment, I'll just hand over to Chris and kind of just to summarize kind of where we've been from here.
Dave, before you flick over,
yeah,
can you if you go back to your presentation, your demo, you had a bunch of X's all over the place. Can you explain what those X's are?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So again, this was more of a kind of a teaser. Just to be very clear, this is just kind of a taster of the kind of functionality we have. And we just want to make sure that you kind of get an idea of the kind of things that are here. We could, as those of you who know me, I could be here all day talking about this. You probably don't want to hear that. So generally the way it works, and this is kind of something which we've got environments now, and RTRS kind of put a lot of work into this about 4 years ago around our collection agent and understanding dynamic environments. So dynamic environments, ephemeral environments, automatically we want to see things, and we don't want to have to add a rule. We don't have to go in there, add the information into the GSE, add a new net probe, manage entity, assign things. All of that is automatic now. All of that kind of ephemeral data around your Kubernetes, my cloud, all of that is automatic and it comes through. Now, with these ephemeral environments, what will happen, and this is something new again in Geneos, this is groundbreaking for us in the sense that you see these grey cells, you see the ones that Chris talked about with crosses on. There's a lot of entities now, a lot of data that comes through that are short-lived. So I might have a Kubernetes pod that spins up for a workload and it spins back down. I've got new instances that start in the cloud and spin down. My Prometheus that comes in, different metrics are there, then they're gone. We have now got the ability to show you those, to show you for today what was running today that is no longer running. And you can understand that the The gateway has always been, and Geneos has always been, stateful monitoring. What is the state of my environment now? Tell me what is running now and tell me the status of it. Geneos 7 now gives me the ability to start to see, yes, what's real time and what's running. Also, it's giving me a status of what was running today that is no longer running. So now I get a full potted history of all of the information that has occurred today or that has occurred in the last hour. So if you start to take that a step further now I can start to see how many pods were running, for example, in my Kubernetes environment, how many pods are running today that lasted less than a few minutes, how much is, what is normal for my sizing in Kubernetes. So now, that it kind of accelerates and just adds to the existing functionality we have. And just, Chris, there's one thing, again, where do you stop with the kind of what we've added to this and making Geneos 7 such that important, very important updates that you talked about at the start. What is important to us as well is not only have we got all of this data and shown you all the functionality we have, but also all of that information, including my proactive monitoring and forecasting, is now available via a full REST API, full REST that we now embedded in here. In addition to that, we have a Grafana data source. So now an official Grafana data source, which you can now extract all of your information into different elements like a Grafana. And that includes the logs. So all of the logs and all the metrics and all of the dynamic threshold, all of that information is now available. If I want to see what those dynamic thresholds are throughout the day, I can extract that for a REST as well. So it's your data after all. So you have the ability to extract that and, do how you want to with your existing processes.
Great.
Again,
there's a lot there.
All day, Chris. So, we have to stop at some point.
Great stuff. You've seen, so Dave showed you the entity viewer, alerting app, dynamic thresholds, which uses those historical calculations, and forecasting. That's a lot. So some questions that we think you will be having. The first one is, are there any commercial implications? So every client who wants to upgrade to Geneos 7, which you can do today, will get access to the entity viewer, the alerting app, those dynamic thresholds, and 24 hours of data retention. There are no commercial implications for those 4 things. Other functionality and longer data retention is subject to licensing. So just talk to your account managers and they'll be able to provide you the answers for that. The second question you're going to be asking, okay, so what's involved in installing, is there any differences in installing Geneos 7? So to get some of this functionality, there is a new analytics component that needs to be installed. And there are now options. It's a lot easy. We've made it really easy to install this analytics engine. There's a simple installer package that you run through with a bunch of prerequisites, and it scans for the prerequisites, and it asks you which apps you want to install, and then it goes through and tells you whether, how it's progressing and whether the prerequisites have been met. So we've made it really, really easy for you to download a tarball, execute a couple of commands, and off it goes. There's a few ways to install it. You can install it in a bring your own Kubernetes environment, or we can install it on VMs or bare metal, Unix servers, or we can do it in the cloud. So on-prem and cloud, VMs or Kubernetes. There's also an online version of doing that, which is really good for like POCs and trials, because it allows us a lot easier to give you to kind of update the packages that you've got, or what we call an air gap option, where you would just need an internet connection to download the package, and that's it. The installation is all offline. So we've made it really, really easy for you to install. So we've done a lot of work on it. I mean, it's great to show you all this new functionality, but we've also made it easy to install.
And I think, Chris, what's important there, I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, again, as part of the Geneos 7 stuff, we've really accelerated that. That whole kind of air gaps and the packaging makes this install, it's minimal, really. It's just a kind of, as you click it, it does a check, make sure you're okay, and then off you go. It's that kind of thing that's such a huge leap forward for us, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that was it. Really hope you enjoyed that. We certainly do. We certainly enjoy delivering this. It's a few times now we've delivered this over the last few weeks, internally and externally. And we're really, really proud of it. So please start upgrading to Geneos 7 and start using those new capabilities. Thank you very much.